works trying to.
Yep, I've got the notification.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jebeli. So members, I'll just briefly explain the situation now the meeting has started. We are not quorate this morning. We have 2 members present. The disaggregation of Northamptonshire County Council has necessitated a recruitment exercise with 2 of our members retiring. I think Michelle will be able to update us on how that recruitment exercise is progressing, and we are also in contact with North Northamptonshire Council to secure their nominee from their councillor membership. So my suggestion is that we run through the business that's on the agenda. Obviously, we cannot make any decisions, which means we cannot appoint a chair and vice chair. But my suggestion would be that officers run through the business of the agenda and brief members on those, and members, of course, can ask any questions they want to. We will defer the appointment of chair and vice chair to the next meeting when we expect to have a full membership in place. Is everyone content with that proposal? Okay.
Is Paul still on the board? Do you know? Paul Evans. I haven't spoken to him, you see, for a while, and kind of expected to see him here, but
yeah. So I don't know if Michelle wants to update, but essentially, Paul had served his full term, and it had been extended towards the end of in the last year of Northamptonshire County Council's existence.
Okay.
In order to, it was just helpful, I think, to have that continuity while the disaggregation process was taking place.
Yeah.
So I believe officers have written to Paul, and obviously Paul can make an application through the process. I don't want to go too much into detail about the application process because I think Michelle will cover that, but he's not currently a member of the board yet.
Okay.
Did you want me to provide that update now, Paul, while we're talking
Yes,
about
I think that would be helpful.
So,
yes, please.
yeah, so effectively, we've launched a recruitment to fill the positions of the scheme member representative roles. That actually finishes, the deadline is tomorrow. So far, it's been quite encouraging, the responses that we've had. So obviously after tomorrow, once we've had a chance to have a look through and progress it onto the next stage, as Paul said, hopefully by November, there's plenty of time to get those 2 positions in place. And like Paul also said, Paul Evans is more than welcome, and he knows he's more than welcome to reapply should he wish to.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, so
We can do apologies for absence.
yep, please, yeah.
Okay, we've got Joanne Walton, who's the Governance and Regulations Manager. I haven't
Okay,
received
thank
any
you.
others.
Declarations of interest is next. Do any of the members present have any interests to declare on items on the agenda? Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting are available, assuming that members have had an opportunity to review them. Are there any questions or comments, notwithstanding the fact that I think Kevin is the only member present today who was present at that meeting? Do you have any questions or comments on the minutes?
No, I haven't, no.
Okay. Thank you. Next item is the action log then.
No action.
Is that,
Yeah, nothing to
and there are none. Okay, and then the pension fund annual business plan and medium term strategy.
I'll go through that, Paul, and I'll just talk through the structure of it, and then you know, open it up to questions really. So we present to the pensions committee a 3-year plan. Obviously, lots more detail in year 1 of that plan, and that goes to the pensions committee every March. We did actually re-present it to the first new pensions committee under West Northamptonshire Council, just so they could understand what the activities were, almost as like an introduction, because really I think what this sets out is what we do as business as usual, and then what you know, extra projects and activities we're doing in addition to business as usual. So just turning through the document, you know, sort of in the early part, pages 21, 22, 23, you can see the structure of the operation. The team that set out there administers both the Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire pension funds. So we are a shared service, with the lead authority being West Northamptonshire. Everybody is employed by West Northamptonshire. But when you look at the numbers of staff, there's probably about 70 to 80 staff. Half of them pretty much do work for the Northamptonshire Pension Fund. So that team set out there is the complete team. The Pensions Committee have agreed objectives, and those are set out on page 23 and over to page 24. So they, from time to time, will be reviewed, but they're just lifted and put into the business plan. Business as usual on page 6 and 7. That usually kind of sets out the different functions within the operation. So it's not just administration, it is the accountancy side. So we do produce the statutory reporting. It is the funding, for example, the valuation of the pension fund. It is the investment side. So the Northamptonshire Fund is now over £3 billion in size. It's dealing with all those, those cash flows in and out, including millions and millions of pounds of contributions each year. Administration's huge. Payroll, we do use the payroll service for payroll administration, but we obviously put all of the new pensioners on there and update them. And obviously, when you're dealing with a fund like this, comms becomes a huge exercise as well. Well, across the two funds, we have 150,000 members. Northamptonshire alone's over 70. So there's lots and lots of communication. Each year, page 27, we set out what the key challenges and influences are. A lot stays the same, but as you probably imagine, there's a lot of environmental changes that do result in us having to update that as well. And then really importantly, page 10 and 11, you can see the finances. So it's a fairly, so as I say, £3 billion fund. As you can imagine, some of the numbers that flow through are quite large. What we call management expenses is 3 to 4 million. That does include the administration expenses, but equally the investment manager fees and quite a significant consultancy costs, which are under governance. We have an investments advisor, we have a governance advisor, we have a fund actuary, we have a benefits advisor. So there's lots of professional advice and legal advice, of course, as well, that flows through. I'd say on that, we are quite certain of those numbers, and the administration costs we normally have quite a good understanding of what they will be by the end of the year. Likewise, things like contributions, we can predict. Benefits payable, we can predict quite well. The bits we just simply can't predict, as you can probably imagine, is the investment income and the change in the capital value of assets. So anything on page 28, below the total income less expenditure, those lines there are incredibly difficult to predict. So we just have to put in it's what the actuary believes we will get as a return on average. Yeah, I think any of the activities in this business plan will feed through into some of the administration expenses and other costs. Yeah. Hi, Gary.
Can I just ask what? I know it's probably a silly question, but we've got like 4 estimates and 1 forecast. Could you just explain what means on this table?
Yeah, so this is I should explain, this is what went to just a straight lift of what went to committee. And at that time we are still effectively in close down, and so finalising the 2021 number. So the first 2021 estimate is what we predicted at the beginning of the year the cost to the fund would be. Okay. The forecast next to it is it's not the final number because we're not being audited yet, so there's still potentially some movement. It's where we thought we would be, and then of course for future years we just have estimates. So at a certain point in time, the forecast will become an actual. Okay, fair enough. But you will see that anyway when we produce the accounts. So in July, we are doing the first cut of the final numbers. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. It's Ken Pritchard here. With regards to I've got a note here with regards to 2021.
Mm.
I see that the estimate was 96 million, but it was forecasted at 610 million. Why such a significant variance in those two figures?
Yeah, so sorry, the fifth, you can see just above it, you've got a 589, which is next to a 54. Yeah. So that is actually, it's actually not taxes on income, it's actually profit and losses on disposal of investments. Yeah. So that's the growth of the fund was massively greater than expected. So going back to my comment previously, what the 54 and indeed what the 117, the 122 and 127 are what the actuary expects the average investment growth to be over the years. So it's coming from, if you like, the long-term actuarial assumption of growth that has to be, fed in to work out what contributions are payable. So what the 589 is, in reality, we have had an exceptional year. We've got individual investment mandates that have performed 40-50% above benchmark.
Wow.
So
what sort of area would that be in?
That's equities. So some of the equity, the massive outperformance or underperformance tends to come from the highest risk areas. So that would be equity or private equity or something like that.
And also the forecast for the following year seems to be quite modest.
Yeah, so obviously, even if we've had an exceptional year, what we do, we always revert the next year to the long-term forecast.
Yeah. Okay. And also one other question: when you talk about total income, I see a 3-year forecast is 8.75 million, and that's down from 1.682.
The 8.75 is the if you like everything after everything coming in, going out in terms of benefits and taking off management expenses, you've got 8.754. So that's if you like before we start taking account of any return or income from investments.
Yeah.
So that's where when we talk about maturity of a pension fund, what we mean is after you take account of all the contributions, etc., and everything coming in, minus all of the benefits going out, and take off your costs, are you in positive or negative territory? So at the moment, the fund is, you can see because brackets on this, you can see from the total income at the top is a positive thing. So having a bracket around the number is a positive for the fund. So we are still in a, if you like, surplus situation each year before we start taking account of any investment return.
I must admit, coming from a commercial background, I've always been used to having brackets as a negative rather than a positive.
Yeah, it's convention in local government, some local authorities. So actually, funny enough, Cambridgeshire is the opposite. So we do sometimes struggle between the two, but yeah.
So I'll just turn it up.
Okay, so yeah, so as I was saying, we've got great uncertainty. Anything really below that total income less expenditure always. But the final numbers, as I say, will be we'll see a first cut of those for the July Pensions Committee, which you will see afterwards. But I think you'll think we do circulate that. But if I press on, the next page talks about risk management. We've got a risk item next, so I won't dwell on that. And really, the final thing is just to look at page 31, because after that, what you have is an analysis of each of the activities that we're going to be undertaking in the business plan. But 31 is the overview, and you can see we have quite a few procurement activities at the top, then a number of governance activities around strategies, policies that we need to deal with this particular year. Ones which touch the scheme membership and data are in the next section, and there are some ones that you may have heard of, like the end of contracting out led to this guaranteed minimum pension reconciliation exercise. There's this age discrimination remedy when we went to the 2014 scheme where certain people were protected, and now we need to go further than that. So there's some legislation coming through over that. We've got the valuation and a few other exercises there. The other ones, I think we've got quite a bit of investment activity, as we always will do at the bottom, including the asset pool. So whilst we're an individual fund, we do pool our assets to try to get economies of scale, better performance, reduce costs with the Access asset pool. So that's something you will hear a lot about over the years. And it's a joint committee arrangement under Section 102 of the Local Government Act. So there's 10 other funds. So each pension fund, their chairman sits on that joint committee arrangement. But I'm happy to talk about any of the activities, but I'll throw it open to questions now.
It's it's Ken Pritchard here again. It's with regards to the procurement of the investment advisory service. At present, it's held by Mercer's. Has that new company been appointed yet?
Well, it has, but it was actually Mercer who was successful
Right.
in that. So the handover is obviously a lot shorter than it would have been, but we are looking at what we want from them over the coming cycle. So that has concluded. Really important. Obviously, they're a
Absolutely.
key professional advisor, of course.
I wish they were advisor to my pension scheme, but that's another story. The last one, as with regards to the handover to the new West and North Hants councils, did it go as planned, and was it satisfactory?
Yes, I mean, obviously we did a lot of work around what was needed from a governance perspective, and obviously the monitoring officer and Paul were heavily involved in that as well. So we've got the I think it's really important, the bits that worked well we continued with, and so if you like, the form of the pensions committee, local pension board, investment subcommittee were retained. We obviously needed to adjust the membership to reflect the fact that we now had two large local authorities, unitary authorities, as opposed to what we had before, and that did pose certain issues. But yeah, I think it went as smooth as it possibly could. What we have now is lots of work to deal with, particularly on the membership side, the fact that thousands and thousands of people have moved from one employer to another and what that means. Mm-hmm. And particularly as we move forward, all the service reviews that will take place, because they obviously have a pension impact as well, potentially.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Mark, please?
Mm-hmm. Of course, Kevin.
About the review of the fund's responsible investment policy. I mean, I know that's been ongoing, hasn't it, for quite a while now. When will that be concluded?
Yeah, so a draft policy went to the last pension committee of the it obviously, yeah. So obviously the background to this is we took about a year to get to that point where we had a policy to put to consultation. We put it out to consultation, and I think we sent over 30,000 direct emails to invite people to contribute to the consultation on the Northamptonshire side. So it was certainly tens of thousands.
Did you get a good response?
Yeah. We got 150 plus responses, which was we've only ever had a couple of responses from consultations before, so this was quite remarkable to put it into context. Yeah. So there certainly was some interest. The headline is that far more people agreed with the policy than disagreed, so it was a positive outcome. But what we're doing is we're taking that feedback. We're going to be formulating. It certainly will be changes made to the policy, but that will go back through an approval route. Okay. To basically finalise a policy. But I mean, this particular policy, the responsible investment policy, goes within our investment strategy, and that is reviewed constantly anyway. So it will need to be reviewed again as part of the valuation cycle. But if anything material changes, we need to go out to consultation on that. So it's not it's done and it's complete. It's a case of continual iterations, really. Okay. The other really important point, Kevin, on this is we, at a pool level, I'm chairing a task and finish group, which is trying to get the guidelines in place for the asset pool. And as part of that, we've had a sort of a gap analysis feedback session with the advisors there, who are a separate company. And we will take on board any feedback from that as well.
Okay. So when it's ready to go, it will come to us, will it?
You will see. I mean, this is we're going to be using as a specialist in this area the investment subcommittee again. So it is. I think what we can do is we can obviously let the local pension board know what the feedback was and the direction of travel in advance of that.
Okay.
That's not a problem. But we'll use the ISC to help finalise the formulation, and then it will go obviously through the approval route of the pensions committee. You will then be able to have a look at what that decision-making process was and what the outcome was. Funnily enough, the Cambridgeshire LPB have asked around this process as well, and I think my view on this is something which is very clearly a specialist area. We do tend to use the respective committees.
Yeah.
If something is a governance, then I'm very happy to use the LPB for pre-scrutiny of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as part of the board, how do we get sight of what is actually being invested in? Because as you can imagine, coming from a union side, there's a lot of discussion about how we oversee responsible investment. And obviously the balance between that and making money for the fund, which has got to be an outcome of the investment, obviously, because that's what it's for, isn't it? We've got to change the way we invest, haven't we? And there is massive pressure on all pension funds to address that. Yes. I mean, getting to the actual nitty-gritty of what are we invested in? Do you know what I mean? Are we invested in that mine over there? Are we invested in that oil company? Do you know what I mean? How do we get to that point of what the asset pool's invested in?
Yeah, so you obviously see the confidential quarterly performance reporting, which has some elements of that. But I mean, I think what you're describing is so a investments subcommittee member would obviously sometimes see the managers and we'll be able to discuss the portfolio with those managers. Yeah. I guess I think what you are asking for there is something we haven't actually provided as a matter of course, because that would be if you like the pack that the manager gives to the subcommittee when they come there. Indeed, I'm trying to think if there's an easier way through this, because even if we gave you a list of the investments, you may, for example, only see one line item for a pooled fund, like for example, we invest in a Baillie Gifford long-term global growth fund. You would just see the line item. You wouldn't see every single investment. I'll have to perhaps actually reflect on that, Kevin. If that's a desire of this local pension board to see the actual individual investments.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah.
Just another question with regards to the valuation plan that was going to be developed with the fund actuary. Has that been completed?
Corey, do you want to come in on that one?
Sorry, the multiple investment strategies was that line?
No, the valuation plan.
Oh, the valuation plan. Yeah. So we're setting up some dates with the actuary to have some in-depth discussions, but we do have an outline plan of broadly when we want to start talking about the different preparations that we need to make and training that needs to be given to officers and committee members. So we're looking at doing that in earnest from October, but over the summer we are discussing some of the higher level stuff as we go along.
Right. Okay. No, because I was just looking at the dates where, in fact, it should have been completed last month.
Like I said, that was the outline plan in terms of when we need to have the pertinent discussions. What you don't want to do with something like this, because it's quite complicated and intensive work that's going on for committee members and officers, you want to time that training along with the decisions that they need to make. So what we don't want to do is have that education now, a couple of months pass, some of that information be forgotten, and then the decision. So what we do is bring the actuary along to the committee meeting where the decision is going to be made. They'll make a presentation there as the training, and that's how we'll move that along. So that's why we set out a broad plan now and do the actual work later on.
I presume that would be a situation where you get untrained members making untrained decisions.
Exactly, which is what we want to avoid. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I mean, look, I think it's things like, for example, the assumptions that the actuary uses are a key part of it, because that can massively influence the numbers. Now, there's a range of acceptable assumptions for any of them, and the actuary would set out the range, and officers would make a recommendation on what one to pick. But in reality, any within the acceptable range would be broadly okay. So, but yeah, that's probably the way to describe how a lot of this works. But we're not going to allow the committee to choose something which would just be outside what the actuary would find acceptable.
One last question with regards to the additional voluntary contribution providers. Could you explain how that actually works, please? Yeah,
so we've got a couple of AVC providers where scheme members, can obviously pay into to increase their benefits.
Yeah.
And we had we undertook a review quite a while back, whereby the outcome was that we were looking to get rid of one of the providers. Now, for various reasons, including the pandemic hitting. But there was other things going on in the background as well. We didn't immediately implement that. But in the meantime, what is our main provider by far, Prudential, have had quite catastrophic performance issues. And I say that recognising we are in public, because they have acknowledged it and sent out letters to everybody and every fund in the country. I think the regulators got involved as well, and so because of that, we effectively want to look at it again, and at this moment in time, the party who's assisting with that are struggling to get information out of Prudential to complete that review. So we are quite happy that we didn't immediately press on with that change, because we might have been in a very bad position right now if we had done. But we're looking at it completely afresh, essentially.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, but yes, I mean that is the business plan and medium-term strategy for the fund.
One quick question: how often does the business plan get reviewed?
The business plan gets reviewed it's under, from an officer's perspective, it's under constant review. The committee sees it every quarter, and you see it every quarter. And so we do a progress update every quarter, including an update on each activity and the cash flows, where we can, although some of the numbers stay quite static. But things like staff costs, etc., will change each quarter. But if we need to put anything else in, we will seek approval for that. So I think when it's going in July, we are actually seeking some additional activities to go into there, where since public. So obviously we drafted this probably in February. Started well before that, but we were going through final approvals in February. Since then, there have been things that have come out where, let's say, they are a larger project than we expected them to be. So therefore, I've put them into the plan.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no more questions, are we happy to move on to the next item? And I think, Michelle, that's you.
So Mark's just gone through all the kind of additional business activities of the fund. So this next report is the administration performance report. And this really focuses more on the business as usual for the administration of the fund. So this is another report that will come to you each meeting. And for the period in question, this particular one, February to May, at the end of May, this report will give you an oversight of some of the administration activities. And this is really a platform for you as the board to see how well we're doing in terms of administration and to raise any queries that you might have. So if I go through the main body of the report to start with, under section 5 is where some of the detail is in terms of the administration for this period. So the first one, just to mention, is the one on the breaches of the law. So under section 5.3.2, there's a table there, and each meeting we will report to you any kind of breaches, any that we either deem material or non-material. And as you can see there, there is an ongoing refund breach there that we deem non-material. And this has been this case for quite a while now due to the regulations. But if for any reason we did see a material breach, that's where that would be reported as well to you. If anything was so material that we needed to contact you outside of a meeting, we would obviously do that and then just put it officially in the report as a follow-up. So this links really tightly with the breaches of the law policy that we've also got, and that will become more apparent to you as we go through as well. But it's just really just to highlight that section, that if you had any queries or you thought there was any breaches that you needed further detail on, or what have you, or needed reporting, then that's where that information will be displayed for you. The next section under 5.4.2 is the summary of the IDRPs that we've got in progress at the moment. So as you can see there, there's 3 that we had going on during this period. 2 have been concluded, and 1 has received an extension on there. So again, every meeting you'll get to see what's going on by way of IDRPs, at what stages they're at, and again, if you have any further questions that you have on any of those. Under 5.5 is the employers and admissions and cessations. So that will just clarify during the period any employers that we've had come into the Northampton Pension Fund, or any that have exited. So that's the kind of key information we hold in the main report. And then what we do, we also, as appendices to the report, give you some further information in terms of, so the first one under Appendix A is the KPI information. So on page 47, what you'll see there is a selection of our KPIs and the statistics that go with those. So as you'll note on this particular update covering the period again from February to the end of May, you'll see 3 red RAG statuses on there and 7 amber. And then what we do is on page 48, there's a bit of a footnote summary there as to why some of those have not been obtained for the period. So again, that's standard that you'll see at each meeting, and again, your opportunity to raise any questions that you have on any of those, and just as your role as local pension board members, just to keep an eye on where we are with our performance and if there's anything that you want to raise on that. So moving on to Appendix B of the report, this is the contributions that we receive from members, from employers, sorry. So effectively on here, we have the actual payment that was received on time and the schedule. And as you'll see from March and April, it's quite pleasing that we've had those 2 months that have come in at 100%. So it is a statutory obligation for employers to pay over their contributions on time. If for any reason they don't, again, this is one of those situations where if it's persistent, we can report to the pensions regulator if we feel appropriate to do so. But as you'll see, even when they haven't been, it's been really high percentages. So generally, we do really well at getting our employees to pay over pension contributions on time. And Appendix C is a confidential appendix, and that basically does relate directly to Appendix B. So if there were any employees that paid late for the period, it is summarised in Appendix C. I'm not obviously going to go into the detail of that information because we're in a public session at the moment. If anybody does have anything they specifically want to ask, we can do that at a private session later. But what you will see on there is details of that late payment, and then what it will summarise, whether it's a one-off or whether it's a persistent problem, and then we make a decision on whether that needs reporting to the pension regulator. So that's a kind of overview of what the report contains. I've got nothing further to add to any of the information that is in the report, but obviously happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
I have one, Joanne, if you don't mind. Under section 5.53, it says that the David Ross Education Trust has come out of the pension fund. It just says Compass Contract Services, but they have a huge amount of schools. Does it mean it's only the contract services part that's removed? I think
Corey might explain this more, but effectively there are so many different catering contracts linked to particular schools and multi-academy trusts. So the fact that it's actually the Compass Contract Services with David Ross in brackets, I guess it is just one of the particular contracts. I don't know if you know anything more about that particular one, do you, Corey?
Yeah, what that's reporting there is the admission body has ceased. So the contractor providing services to the trust has ceased participation in the fund, not the trust itself.
Okay.
The academies. Again, because as Michelle said, Compass has probably 10 or more contracts in the fund, so we just have the brackets underneath it to identify which employer they're working for.
Okay. So yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I was just concerned because we got a huge amount of members in David Ross Trust.
Yeah, they're one of our bigger trusts in the fund, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's Ken Pritchard here. With regards to organisations that don't pay their contributions on time or don't pay, can they be excluded from the fund?
Michelle, I'll come in there.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a number of steps before that we manage the payment of contributions with some types of bodies. So the admission bodies, for example, the contractors that we were just talking about, and some of the charities. As part of the admission agreement, there is a termination clause if they're not paying their contributions. So that is an ultimate sanction that we could take if we needed to. With some other types of bodies, so councils, academies, parish councils, things like that are called scheduled bodies and have an automatic right to participate in the fund. We can't reject them from the fund. So there is no sanction of that kind with those type of employers.
And also, just for my own personal information, are organisations that are not local government orientated, are they allowed to join the scheme?
Yes, if they're carrying out a service on behalf of a public sector body. So as we see with that Compass Contract Services, obviously a private firm, but working within the public sector. You have some charities as well that may not strictly be public sector, but they either have a community of interest with a public sector body or did have at one point when they were admitted. So those are the requirements to come in, but they are essentially private bodies in that area.
Thank you for that.
It's quite a good return, isn't it, on the people that pay on time? I mean, they're only 98.5, I think is the lowest. I think that's great, isn't it, over a year?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it is very good.
Do you have to remind people for this to get them to comply, or does this just happen organically?
It depends on a month by month basis at times. It's in the past there was a little bit more work that we had to do to get that number up. Been a lot of hard work with the fund accounting team to get to this position and making it as easy as possible for employers. One of the big things is now that it's all electronic payments. We did have some that paid by check in the past, which you might have to remind them to pay the check in, for example. But no, it mostly happens just automatically now. We have an escalation process in place that if it's not paid on time, we'll send a reminder within the first 5 days. and then if it's not responded to, it gets escalated up the chain. I haven't had any that have been escalated to me as an employee liaison officer, as the employer services manager in quite some time. So that shows you that that process is working automatically at that stage.
That's great, isn't it? Really good.
Absolutely. I think just from what Corey was saying, I think the work has been put in previously and we're now seeing the benefits of that, because as Corey said, a couple of years ago, probably plus, it was quite time exhausting trying to get employers to pay contributions on time, and even with the reporting to the pension regulator, it all takes resources to do that. And as Corey says, we've not had anywhere near the same amount of work in this area. So I think the piece of work that was done previously has really paid off, and we see that now. Obviously, really high percentages coming in each month.
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
Just to put that into context, when we say time consuming, that was with a minority of employers. It wasn't by any means a big number.
Oh, no.
We were still probably in the 90 percentile area, but just lower down in that than we are now.
Yeah.
I do remember seeing in probably the previous year, there seemed to be some persistent offenders, if you like. Do you know what I mean? There was a couple on there that were regularly on there. Quite small amounts, but still, they've still got to pay on time, haven't they?
Yeah.
It's really important. I mean, it's 110 million a year contribution, so it's how we can pay the benefits.
Of course, yeah, definitely. That's really good work, isn't it?
Was there any more questions on this one, or are you happy to move on?
Happy to move on.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Yep.
So the next report is, we've talked a little bit about this or touched on it previously, which is the risk register. So as we've kind of previously mentioned, this report also will come to you at each meeting. It also goes to the pension committee twice a year. And this report really is for the local pension board to have input and kind of a bit of a working document in terms of making sure that it remains relevant and up to date. So in this particular review, again, under section 5, just to highlight there that the specific changes that we felt appropriate to make this time round. So under section 5.1, so the first one on there, and again, we've touched on ESG earlier in Mark's presentation. What we've done there is just change the mitigation on risk number 3, just to strengthen the fact that there is the chair of the task and finish group, which is looking at ESG requirements and making sure that needs are met. So just making sure that task and finish group is looking at the whole picture and taking a balanced approach there. Risk number 6 we've added as a new risk, and this has come out of the increased work and focus, I guess, on cyber security and cyber resilience. So as you may be aware, over time, this is starting to come really to the front of a lot of organisations now in terms of what more could be done in terms of cybercrime and obviously protections. Originally, cybercrime was in risk 16, where we talked about where it was system security and cybercrime, but we feel now it's got to the point where it's such a big task. It's actually coming through the business plan, through the risk register, and it's kind of linking up directly with things like the pension regulator, code of practice and things like that. There's a big focus on it in there as well. So due to that focus, what we've done is we've put specific cybercrime risk in there, and this associated mitigations will be linked just to cybercrime, because we see that obviously increasing as time goes on. For example, the cyber strategy that's being developed, eventually that will move into the mitigation on there and it will become a bigger thing. So that's that one. On risk 9, you'll see there we've just updated the mitigation, just really a bit more focus on the SIP for skills and knowledge training again. You'll hear a lot about training going forward. again, there's a big push from several different angles on that in terms of good governance, pension regulator, code of practice. So again, that's just been tightened up a little bit to display this, the 6 months of joining, that, there will be some specific training going on there.
Michelle, could I just come in on that one, please? It's the gross score we've. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's all right. Just wait for. Okay, excellent. Yeah. So it's the great, because we now know we've got lots and lots and lots of new members. It's the gross score that's increased to reflect the increased likelihood of, if we did nothing, people wouldn't know how and wouldn't be able to perform their roles. So that's the rationale there. It's actually the gross score that's been increased.
Yeah, and then that mitigation obviously just counteracts that gross score and brings it down, well, keeps it at the level it was, just because we've obviously accounted for that. So and then risk 13. So the residual risk has gone up on this because of the likelihood. So with this particular risk, we've then moved up 2 positions, and again, an extra mitigation has been put in there regarding the governance and legal advice that we would take if we needed to, if there was a potential conflict of interest to occur there. And then the very last one, risk 14, it's just had a slight tweak in terms of the wording of the risk. And this was really just to highlight, originally it was focusing on incorrect and poor quality. But actually, as a fund, we also know that when the data is delayed, it also causes just as much as an impact to us, trying to chase data and get our records correct. So the difference with that risk in there is adding the word delayed and delayed in there. And again, adding some extra mitigations around that, just to ensure that we try and get the data on time, as well as being in a correct format, and the quality is what we need as well. So we've just put a bit more emphasis on correct is good, but also on time, just to reiterate that with the risk register. So they're the actual changes in terms of what we propose to put into the risk register itself. Under section 5.2 is where we have our short to medium term risks. These are the ones that we don't feel are need adding into the register itself, because that's quite a concise high level document. But they're things that we just keep an eye on over time, just to make sure that we keep an eye on them and you're aware of them. So the first one is the impact of the pandemic, which has now been on there for a while. And there's not really any particular, big update on that one. Just there's been a slight movement since the last meeting in terms of some face-to-face meetings are now going ahead. So things like the pension committee meetings are now happening face-to-face. And the same as a very small number of office meetings as well. But predominantly most members of staff are still working from home. So that's where we are at the moment with that. And obviously, as further updates come out from government, that's continuously being reassessed. And the second one on there, as we've just spoke about, really, the knowledge of new members of the pension committee and pension board. That is a risk because of the decisions that are being made. You would have seen that there was some training offered on the 21st of June. So that's the first piece of training that's already been undertaken to start that process off in terms of getting the skills and knowledge up to date. And then in addition to that, hopefully you'll have received an email now talking about the additional SITFA training that's being offered over the summer. So those additional dates, so once we get to the end of the September programme, if most members have done the suite of those, it should give everybody a really good grounding and a really good understanding for some of the decisions and some of the information coming through in the future. If anybody hasn't received an email, in the governance and compliance report, the dates are actually listed in there as well. And obviously just contact me after the meeting and we'll make sure we'll get those to you. But again, just really with all the work going on in terms of training, you know, from various different angles, just really that's a really important focus for the board this year as well. So just to highlight that. But apart from that, that's the main body of the changes to the risk register and the comments there. If anybody's got any additional comments or anything they feel we could change.
It's Ken Pritchard. It's with regards to report background. The 4.1, when we talk about the risk strategy approved by the previous pensions committee in 2019, when is it due to be revised again? And particularly bearing in mind the you know, the COVID scenario, should that be actually reviewed quicker than the 3-year period that they actually stipulate?
Yeah, so at the moment, we have it on the radar that we need to do a full review of the risk strategy and the risk register. Obviously, at the moment, as in Mark's report earlier, there's quite a lot going on in terms of this period following Thursday unitary and elections. And there's other policies and strategies that also need reviewing. So I do appreciate that that is one that we will be moving up the list, but I don't know at this point if we know an exact time. I don't know, Mark, if you've got any thoughts on when we can get to that.
Well, I mean, it states within it in 5.1 in the strategy that it's a 3-year, isn't it? I mean, I think we have got a number of governance activities going on beyond the strategy. So we have our business continuity plan that is is an activity to look at a lot, and I guess that will be. I did a review of that immediately before the pandemic, a very, very quick review, to ensure we could actually continue to operate once we had to start working remotely. But we're going to be obviously looking at how fit into the new West Northamptonshire structure, the relationships, what we've learned from the pandemic. So I think a lot of those related things will go into the business plan. I think this strategy is just the general way we deal with risks, and I'm not sure even if we did a full review that would dramatically change at all. The risk register is, of course, the detail of each risk and what we're looking at. So I think the strategy, I'd say we're unlikely to broadly change our approach to dealing with risks. You know, I think we're happy with the 5x5 matrix. It's obviously gives an incredible amount of detail, 5x5. If anything, we'd make it more simple to manage. So I think I don't see any reason to change it from the 3 years at the present time.
Also, next question was with regards to the task and finish group. What is their sort of what is their sort of criteria, and who will they be reporting to?
Sorry, when you say task and finish group, do you mean the reference around responsible investment?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Right. So that is one of the officer groups within the Access asset pool. So Access, as I said, it's at the very, very top. There's a joint committee, which is the chairman of each pension fund, so including the chair of the Northamptonshire Pension Fund, and the main officer group is what we call the officer working group. This is the senior people like myself in each pension fund as officers. There is some oversight from Section 151 officers as well, Section 1501 officers group. So what tends to happen is you have all these subgroups who do work. The officer working group oversee that and then decide what's going to go forward. It gets approval from the Section 151 officers, but then the joint committee are the ones who make the decisions. And if there's any impact on individual funds, let's say, for example, a strategy is developed, or in this case, responsible investment guidelines, they would come back to individual funds, and then the individual funds would have to go, yeah, we agree they're okay as a pool level set of guidelines. That has happened with things like for example the inter-authority agreement itself, which set up the joint committee, like the voting policy at a pool level. That kind of was agreed at a pool level and then flowed back to the funds for their individual agreement as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all the questions in the risk register?
Yep.
Shall I move
Yeah.
on? Yeah. Okay, so the next report again is another standing item report that you will see at every meeting. So the governance and compliance report is really a way of letting you know all the current activities that's going on in the LGPS landscape at the time. This report almost kind of, you could class it as a training item sometimes, because it holds so much information about what's going on in the LGPS and things that we need to broadly be aware of and things that are going to impact us. This particular report is a really light report in compared to what we've had going on previously, where things have been kind of moving at a fast pace. Everything seems to kind of slow down for a bit now. So the only two things that I'll kind of just briefly mention on is under section 5. So we've got the good governance review that's still going on there. There's no real further update from February. The good governance, so there's a good governance plan that is currently with the local minister, the local government minister for review. We've not heard the outcome of that as far as I'm aware yet. So basically that's something that's still on the horizon. It's just in that kind of interim period where we're just waiting for the next steps on that and to see whether we can progress that more. And again, when the good governance comes in, there's a few changes there. I mean, our governance is kind of hitting most of the boxes anyway. We've kind of done our own reviews and stuff, but there's some extra bits there. And it's again mainly harking back to the training again. It's mainly about the level of training and what we're offering, and we're covering quite a lot of that off anyway. And obviously who needs the training, there's some slight differences there. The only other thing to mention is about the pension regulator code of practice. Again, not any further developments than we had kind of earlier in the year. The code of practice is due to come into force from November. The consultation on it has finished now. I think it was in May that finished. So we're waiting on basically any feedback from that consultation to see if there's going to be any changes at all or any slight tweaks. But the general consensus is that from November we'll need to start implementing and using the new code of practice, which is the combined code of practice, and then we'll have 6 months from that date to be fully compliant with that. And again, there's not realms of work that we need to do there. It's just a few small changes that's going into the code that we'll need to consider from our fund point of view. So apart from that, there's not anything really to report, anything that's changed or significantly come in that time, but happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
No, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you.
The next one's the communications plan, which is my paper, if we're happy to move on to that one. Okay, so this is to present the communications plan for the year to you. As Mark said earlier on, given the size of the fund that we have, there's quite extensive communication activities that have to go on throughout the year, so we like to plan those in advance where we can. The plan has been sent to the pension committee, has been approved, so it is being presented just for noting by the board, but I'm always happy to take any feedback and comments that people have that they think might help improve our communications. I don't have anything in particular to add to the report. The plan itself is attached as an appendix to that report, and you can see lots of activities going on there. To reassure you, the biggest activity that we've been undertaking in the first few months of the year has been around the local government reorganisation, trying to make sure that members are aware of the changes, what their options are, and we've put out some extensive materials around that. I'm also going to be doing a follow-up session for both authorities where I'll be delivering a presentation to members that have questions. This is at the request of the unions for us to do so. So I'll be going through that in a bit more detail. That's not on this plan. And I mentioned that as an example of how we adapt this as we go out throughout the year when new requirements come along. So this is just the... So yeah, this is the pre-planned activities. We do have other activities that go on throughout the year as they're required. And as you can see, we've tried to cover all stakeholders as well. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
No, sure. No, I've got no comments, Corey.
It's Ken Pritchard here. What sort of response did you get from the member survey?
The member survey is an ongoing survey, so it's not something that we do at just once. What this is sort of when you contact your bank and they send you a text message afterwards to say, how was the service you received? It's more like that kind of survey, just so that we can keep track of satisfaction levels. I don't have any figures to hand for recent responses, I'm afraid, but that's something that we could look into if it's desired.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you see, it's interesting. I don't know if you've seen recently, there's quite a bit of talk about text messages, isn't there? And and scammers are using text to quite heavily at the moment. And we do use quite a few texts, don't we, Corey? So we're going to have to look at that, I think, as how scheme members are absolutely certain that what we send out is is definitely from us.
Yeah, we've kind of scaled back on the text messages more recently because of that, and we rely on emails. We use a system called Granicus, which is a government-based system allowing us to do mass communications to people. We can track through who's clicking on those and get all sorts of intelligence. One of the problems that we have had with that, though, is members asking if they are genuine. So they have been going to their employers. So the positive is members are aware of this. You know, they are looking out for fraud and stuff. The problem is it means that our message isn't always getting through because they think it is fraud itself. So I'm working with my communications officer at the moment to try and find a solution around that. One of the easy things that we can do is clearly let the employer know before communications go out to their members, so that if the members do query with them, they can reassure them it's a genuine communication. But even things like putting your logo on things nowadays isn't good enough, because scammers can just copy your logo and put it on themselves. So in this digital age where we want to be efficient and quickly, there's that quandary of making sure it's a trusted communication as well.
Corey, I send out a blog to our 5,500 members every week. Now, if you could let me have some sort of information, or there's some way that people can identify that your communication is the correct one, do you know what I mean? And it's not a scam.
Yeah,
I'd be quite happy to put that out to people, because a huge amount of them are fund members, either paying in or taking from it. Do you know what I mean? It might help a little bit, you know what I mean, just with that bunch anyway.
Yeah, that'd be really useful. Once we come up with something that we can say we're going to put onto all of them. One thing that we have been including, but again, a member wouldn't necessarily know it's going to be doing. We have put a QR barcode on there nowadays, so that people can scan through and get straight to our website. Again, though, the problem is anybody can create those and take you to any website. So yes, I'll bear that in mind as we come up with something. But what would also be useful, if you're sending communications out to large groups as well, if there's anything that you as a union do that maybe we could learn from, that would be quite helpful as well.
Okay, do you want to just contact me outside of this meeting then, and we'll have a chat about it and see?
Yes, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you got my email, Corey, so just contact me and we'll have a chat. Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There is one final actual communications update, which even Corey, this is so hot off the press, you may not know. We're actually reopening our pension help desk. I believe it's going to be next week now. We had to shut it down whilst we've been working remotely. It has had an impact, basically on the scheme members trying to contact us. But that is we've got the green light for more staff to go back into the office. We've got the equipment and desks lined up now. So next week we should be reopening the pension help desk for scheme members.
And just I was aware of that one, and I've already asked the team to update our website and communication.
Good.
With that additional contact.
Will I be able to put that in the blog this week then? Do you want me to tell them that, or do you don't want to rush of people contacting you?
Yes.
There's always that risk, isn't there?
That's an interesting question. Well, I mean, I think interestingly, the problem it's generated is when we got really busy around the tier 1 to 3 consultation around the exit cap changes, it was the ability for people to ring us to chase things. But we are working on so the main team where we got delays, we're working on yesterday's work now, so we are pretty much completely up to date. So there shouldn't be any splurge of people going, well, where is this? Because we are actually hopefully now back on completely on track.
Okay. So I could let people know that's.
I think so. We'll get our operations manager to contact you, Kev.
Okay.
Just in case there's any, just so we're absolutely certain it's happening.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. If there's no other questions, are we? Well, I think the next item is in confidential session, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we can,
just going to bring the agenda plan forward, if that's okay. Just because it seems pointless going private and coming back out again. I've got nothing to add on it. It's just if anyone's got any queries on any of the upcoming papers on there.
No.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so if we turn off the live feed,